at the council meeting next week. But I'm sure today you all want to join with me on sending condolences and best wishes to his family. Item 2 then is apologies, and we do have Councillor Jane Francis and Councillor Sharon Thompson running slightly late for this meeting, so they will arrive as we work our way through the agenda. Are there any other apologies? No. Declaration of interest. Does anybody wish to declare an interest in respect of any agenda item? Item 4 then is exemption from any possible exclusion of the press and public, and we have exempt appendices in respect of items 15, 16 and 19 on today's agenda. Does anybody wish to raise anything on those exempt appendices? Okay, not read, we will proceed with the agenda as it was set out. Which takes us to item 5, which is Birmingham City Council performance and progress against the delivery plan during Q1 of this financial year. Brilliant.
Thank you. So the content of this is the same as before. The structure of the report has been changed slightly just to make it clear where things relate to portfolios and to make it easier to read based on feedback from members. Got 2 summary tables setting out the overall performance in relation to our GRAG framework, blue meaning exceeded target, green for met target, amber missed minor issues, red for significant issues, and a short summary of the main achievements of each cabinet member as well. So hopefully that's just clearer to find your way around. Benchmarking against other councils, which is something we are very keen to do, remains an issue. Many councils have still got their performance, parts of their performance suspended. Getting data for benchmarking continues to be a challenge as councils are coming out of COVID. But it's something we are regularly reviewing and trying to get hold of the data so that we can do that, because that's a very important part of performance reporting. There is still an ongoing impact of COVID, not as much as there has been, but you will see that showing up in a number of measures. Demand for council services continued to be driven upwards during Q1 by the pandemic, and in particular, the severe financial hardships being felt by so many families across Birmingham as furlough came to an end and the economic impact has started to be felt. Service delivery in some cases has also been affected. You'll have heard of the pandemic. We were not immune from that. There are a number of services that were affected by people having to self-isolate or having to isolate because of family members, which has created challenges both with us and our contractors. Household waste, for example, did have some issues during this quarter. We have had a phased reopening of day centres, and most of those are now open. I know it's been a topic of questions in previous meetings. Those that are not open and closed due to building restrictions and physical issues now rather than staff ones. And just overall, of the 93 indicators that we're able to report data at this point in time, 62 are rated more green, so it's 2/3 are on track. 14 are rated amber and 17 are red, and you've got the full breakdown of those in the report reasons. Other than that, I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Well, thanks very much. People wanting to speak, and that will be others. First of all, you.
Thanks very much, Ian. And as the first person speaking, the Conservative group, I sort of echo your thoughts, the sad thoughts they say about sad passing of Neil Eustace. Many people will have better times to give words for him, but just what I'll say at the moment, he was a lovely guy who helped everyone raise a sharp councillor, but also proved the fact that you can get on and work with other opposition parties and be an effective councillor. So it's sadly missed by everyone in the Conservative group. Moving on to the report, I concur with Bridget. I think it makes more sense the way it's laid out. It's easier to read, and when referencing points, etc., it's a lot easier to see who you're focusing things at. So appreciate the change. The one point I was going to raise here, I noticed, was the breach of data security that is referred to in the report. Previous quarter there have been 10 breaches. That has risen to 22, which I think is a concerning rise and trend there. I see that the council's response to that is to have a word with the staff and have a bit of online training or something. I would like to see a bit more of a robust plan to accompany that, especially as fine from the Information Commissioner's office can be 2% of turnover. I think some sort of more reflection should be seen there. I'd be interested to know of those 22 breaches, how many of those have actually been reported to the Information Commissioner, and of those 22 breaches of personnel data, how many people were told that their data was breached? Thanks very much.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. Can I thank you first of all for your comments about Eustace, and for the Liberal Democrat group. We are totally devastated by his loss, the loss of a great friend and colleague and inspiration. And he's gone from a devastating illness far too young, and I think it's a great loss to the council. In terms of this report, first of all, I think it's welcome that it's been rearranged around the cabinet portfolios. I think that's a step forward, because it allows everybody, particularly the opposition, to hold cabinet members to account for their performance as cabinet members. So I think that's good. I wanted to just ask about something that's not here, and that's a high-level reporting on progress against fly tipping, because the administration has put £7 million in exceptional money aside to tackle the scourge of fly tipping. Probably be helpful and sensible to see progress of that spending and the achievement of that spending tracked. And I know that there are some statistics around reports and incidents, and the figures around prosecutions. I'm not sure if that, for instance, if there are any figures around response to complaints on fly tipping. It would be interesting to see the speed with which reports are tackled and dealt with, and which incidents are resolved. So perhaps you could consider getting a measure in these reports to look at that. The street cleaning figures are always very late and so annual. They tell us very little, which would be another marker for success in cleaning up the streets. But we see those figures so little. They're very, very hard to track on a regular basis.
Thanks, John. We will be collecting data on the spend of that money, and just on the issue of fly tipping and the data that's been collected on that. Some of that data will be collected through the complaint system, of course, which is mapping out complaints coming into the council, the issues that those complaints are based on, and then the council response. So that data, which at some point over in the coming months, individual members will be able to get access to in respect of their own ward. You will be able to see progress, hopefully, on fly tipping. Just before I bring in others, I'm going to make some comments on my own portfolio. First of all, to say that the City Council has finalised its joint venture contract with Reynolds for the Smithfield development here in the city centre, which is a big step forward for both the council and the city. It's a significant redevelopment site, Smithfield, and it will see the creation of thousands of new homes and tens of thousands of new jobs in the city. We've also launched a consultation on a vision for Perry Bar, which will again transform that part of North Birmingham in the years to come. And we have launched adopted the Sutton Coldfield Town Centre Master Plan, which I'm surprised you didn't comment upon, because it will be transformational for Sutton Coldfield. And of course, we have now launched Be Bold, Be Birmingham branding, which hopefully we've all seen out and about around the city. And then finally, I just wanted to pick up the couple of areas where there's not been progress made towards my portfolio. First of all, in respect to the Food Standards Agency and the plan that we're putting in place to increase the number of food inspections, that plan has been endorsed by the Food Standards Agency, and we are currently working to that plan. We're also seeking to recruit an additional 6 officers, plus using student environmental enforcement officers to carry out some of the inspections. So I would expect to see us make positive progress both against that plan and to the satisfaction of the Food Standards Agency as we recover from the pandemic. And then just to pick up this British Standards Institution ISO accreditation training standards, you'll see the comment is that this will be the last year we see accreditation to that standard. And the reason for that, which strangely is not given in the report, is because that accreditation process is very, very expensive. So we'll be taking an alternative process in the future. It's less expensive, but also has the benefit of providing some additional support services to the training standards operation in the council. So I think overall, as far as my portfolio is concerned, we are making significantly good progress, and we are dealing with those that one area with the Food Standards Agency where we need to improve our service. I'll now bring in others. First of all, John, do you want to comment on the comments John made about flight time?
Thank you, Leader. First thing I'll say is that this report covers the first quarter, and we don't have data to show an improvement yet because we're just started rolling out the actual improvements. The money was announced. We are completing improvement of some of our enforcement officers, but we do have the 2 mobile household recyclers out and about in the Lifford area, which is the southwest of the city, and in Pony Bar, which is the north and northwest of the city, and they are going extremely well. And I know they've been a huge success and welcomed by every councillor and every party wherever they visited their wards. I'm looking forward to getting one into Redfern and letting that happen to the east of the city and into Waycox Green. Actually, on that note, Leader, I associate myself with your comments on Councillor Eustace. He was a constituency colleague of mine, and he will be missed locally. 35 years service is something to be noted, and he had a very good record as a loyal and hard-working councillor in Yardley East. So people there will need to find a good replacement for them. So pass on my sympathy to the friends and family again, John. Other positive stuff, we've seen very, very low waste sent to landfill. In fact, no little waste at all was sent during May, just simply the fly ash. So we're well ahead of target on that one. We've increased the amount of recycling to 41%, including the bottom ash recycling. There is still work to do on miscollections. As the Deputy pointed out, we have been affected by the pandemic, and we had some points during August where our crew absences were at the worst they've been throughout the pandemic, and that has a knock-on effect. Has a knock-on effect in collecting refuse, but it also has a knock-on effect in street cleansing because we take crews off street cleansing to reinforce refuse collection because that's been our priority since the start of this process. But hopefully that's improving now, and we should be able to get our street cleansing crew back to their job keeping the street clean and tidy. And just to say again that we will provide full data on fly tipping. Everything we're doing on this is data driven. So we're going to where the problems are, where people are reporting the issues. The wards that are being targeted are the ones that have the most serious problem. Sparkbrook and also DBs, for example, has a problem that equates to 4 or 5 other wards on its own. That is the level of issue in that particular ward. So that's where we're putting the focus there. We are completing the consultation on the camera rollout this week, and I expect that to go live over the next few weeks. So there will be more data coming along. We're happy to report back to either Cabinet and to scrutiny in due course, but making good progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Tristan.
Thank you, Leader. Just a couple of things I'd like to draw out from the indicators themselves. The first one relating to the financial resilience indicators using the CITFA process. Members will noted from the text that we haven't included data for that, and that's simply because we are working with CITFA to develop a more sophisticated methodology around this. I don't think there can be any doubt that we're moving in the right direction in terms of financial management, given the recent 3-star review. But I just wanted to give members assurance that we will keep scrutiny, especially updated on the process of developing that more sophisticated approach. The other two I wanted to draw on really were just around health and safety, and the 2 related to health and safety. Really just to say that I'm keen that we move this up the agenda of council. I myself will be conducting visits with staff to key locations around the health and safety agenda, and then it's something we'll be looking to report back on to the relevant forum, whether it's a cabinet or scrutiny committee, because I am keen that the organisation takes a closer look at the way it corporately handles health and safety issues within the organisation.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? Okay, Bridget, anything further?
Just on the issues that you had raised. So I'm happy to facilitate a full briefing for you on what lies behind those numbers. That would be welcome. When it comes to data breaches, it's a combination of things. So we have very high levels of training across the council in terms of handling data. very often it's things like basic IT skills that lead to issues. So there are other peripheral issues around this that we do need to be addressing. We are looking at quite seriously. We're very happy to facilitate any further briefing on that for you. Thank you for comments about the format of the report. That is welcome. We'll keep on doing it in that way. And we hope to be able to return to a normal reporting with benchmarking, etc. Hopefully in the next cycle.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think what briefing we really welcome, because I think what I was concerned about was that certainly on one instance there was the occasion when a spreadsheet of everyone's names and addresses was put up into the Brum account, and there were people who were vulnerable, people who were receiving 3+ passes. There was then potentially victims of domestic violence who were being put into safe homes. Obviously, their addresses were on a spreadsheet that were put on the website. I can understand why the council took the decision not to notify them, because they felt the breach was low and therefore why worry people who are in very vulnerable situations anyway. But then I was just wondering, on those 22 breaches, how many other people were informed that their information had been breached, because I think it gets to the point where people probably do have to know what's happened, but briefing would be well.
Well arranged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we can agree then, recommendation 2.1. Any cabinet not agree that? And that is agreed. The Youth Justice Plan, Sharon will be with us shortly, so I'm going to move that a little further down the agenda, and we'll move on to item 7, the West Midlands e-scooter trial extension. So,
thanks, Ian. As colleagues will be aware, on the 9th of May 2020, DfT announced that e-scooter trials, originally planned for 4 areas of the country, including housing in the West Midlands, will form part of the future transport zones. Some of these areas were extended to include other areas. The initiative formed part of a £2 billion package to support cycling and walking in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Following the announcement, the e-scooter operator Voi was selected as a sole operator here in the West Midlands. The process was run by Transport for West Midlands. E-scooter trial here in our region launched in September 2020 here in Birmingham City Centre. Since then, the trial in Birmingham has been expanded to cover the city core and areas to the north and south of the city along the A34 and A38 cycling corridors. Council officers have worked closely with Voi to manage the direction of the trial, to develop operational rules for different parts of the city, address any challenges and prioritise the safety of both e-scooter and the road users. As the trial commenced in September 2020, it was due to run out in September 2021, as Cabinet agreed. This report seeks approval to extend the West Midlands e-scooter trial until the end of March 2022 and potentially further to the end of September 22, as it's expected that the DfT will grant a further extension to the national trial. The report provides detailed information on the operational parameters of the trial in Birmingham, including measures that have been taken by the regional authority, the council, and Voi to address potential issues caused by the trial, such as pavement riding and inappropriate parking of these scooters. The council are also listening and engaging with a wide range of stakeholder groups, particularly those representing the views of disabled residents. My colleague, Councillor John Cotton, has also been looking at this area of work in support of the process. A backbench cross-party group has also been established to look into some of the feedback that backbenchers are also raising with respect to the trial. In addition, the report provides some insight into the lessons learned from the trial by responding to all the questions posed in the Cabinet report dated 3rd of June 2020. These include insights on the use of e-scooters, safety, motorship, potential of e-scooters and policy considerations. Finally, there are some very important developments that Voi are exploring and testing in another place in the UK in relation to tackling pavement riding. I'm hopeful from conversations we've had with both the regional authority and Voi that these interventions will be introduced into our city very soon, which will address potentially the most challenging of issues, which is obviously pavement riding. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hussein. Rob.
Thank you. And first of all, just add the comments you had already made about Charlie touched on the fact that 35 years is an astonishing amount of time to be on the council, and actually really goes to show just how well loved he must have been and to be able to remain on and defeated all that time. Just picking up on this, there's a couple of things I want to pick up. The report touches on the safety issues, and the reports have been about issues. I know with a members group there's been issues raised as well, and obviously that's been in the press. I think it's clear in the next stage of the trial, more needs to be done around education of use of them. In particular, I think the most dangerous usage I've witnessed is the going of the wrong way down one-way roads, so going head-on into traffic, because that is just so utterly dangerous. And I mean, I've seen, particularly in bus lanes, scooters doing that, so going round corners on a one-way road in towards where a bus will be coming, they're just not going to survive if a bus happens to be coming around the corner at the same time. So I think education on that's really important. But I've also wanted to make specific requests around parking. So I know in the city centre, the parking spaces, and they're mandatory where you have to leave them, the drop-off points, but it's only advisory in the suburbs. And I think it would be useful to move to a mandatory situation in the suburbs as well, because I know there's been a lot of issues raised by the RNIB about this. Councillor Peter Fowler went out on a walk with some of the people from that organisation to have a look at how difficult it is for blind people to be able to avoid them when there's not a designated place. So I think if we could look at that, I think that would help improve a lot of the pedestrian safety issues that have been.
Yeah, I agree with those points, and the whole point of these pilots is to learn about the use of these vehicles and ensure that they can be used safely in the future. John?
Thank you, yes, and on the basis of that, I just wonder whether it's wise just to continue the pilot as it is. I think this is an important trial. It's important that the council develops and supports new technology and low carbon ways of traffic. The cabinet member indicates that the pedestrian, the riding on the pavement has not been resolved. And I saw somebody today doing it. And we know that the Federation of the Blind is very anxious about the continued use of e-scooters. Secondly, clearly the e-scooters need to be linked with cycling and cycle network. And I wonder whether maybe more rapid progress on developing specific cycle routes within the city centre might assist in making this work better. It would be quite interesting to review what's going on out in the suburbs, if you like. People are clearly travelling out on cycle lanes, which is good. But what's happening after they come off the cycle lanes? We have the complaints about them being dumped on street corners. So it'd be interesting to know why the technology is in some ways not more advanced in tracking what riders are doing, restricting them to approved routes, because sat-nav technology can be quite specific. So I wonder what the expectations are in terms of the technology that will track them. The other thing is what are the thoughts about e-bicycles? I think we've got pedal bike schemes and we've got e-scooter schemes, but I'm not sure we've got the one in the middle, which is the electronic bicycles.
We do.
We do. Okay.
The hire scheme that's operated by Transport West Midlands, the intention is to have e-bikes as part of that.
It's on the way. Okay. Good.
Okay, that's comments. I've got one comment myself. It's in connection with what you've just said, in fact, John. I do think we were right to take part in this pilot, because we're collecting data which is invaluable in finding out about how these machines are used. I think that there are improvements. Whether we can ever get to a point where the satellite navigation is accurate enough to distinguish between one of these vehicles being on the road and being on the footpath, I think is an interesting question. But we certainly need to be thinking about measures that keep these vehicles off the footpath. But being involved in the pilot, of course, gives us the opportunity to influence government in the decisions they will eventually take around these vehicles. And we must bear in mind that although it is illegal to use a private e-scooter on the highway, people can purchase those vehicles, and you do see them out and about. So I think being part of the pilot, collecting the data, learning some lessons, and then being in a position to influence government when they take a decision is very, very important. Having said all of that, though, I don't think we can simply go on if the government continues to just extend the pilot and doesn't bring itself to a point where it's prepared to make a decision. We would want to influence that decision. But I do think we need to reassure the public that we're not prepared if the government just continue extension after extension after extension to go along with that. We will, at some point, have to make some representation about that to the government. We'll see.
Thank you. Can I thank all three group leaders for their very sensible and helpful comments. Just to respond to the one by one, Councillor Alden, I think absolutely right, more needs to be done around education. We'll continue to challenge the operations. I know they do quite a bit before somebody gets onto their first ride. I think maybe we can ask them to do something on an annual basis to refresh the rules, refresh the rules and guidance on how to use these scooters. I'm deeply concerned about how some of the e-scooters have been used, particularly the reference you made going down the wrong way on a one-way road is particularly dangerous. And again, we need to do more. I think we do have, the council have regular meetings with the police to be challenging in terms of resources with the police, but we'll continue to ask if the police can help the operator carry out some enforcement. The scheme has evolved over the 12 months, and one of the things we have brought in is mandatory parking in the city centre for, and that is starting to be rolled out right across the trial area, so I can assure you that will happen. Councillor, the technology that's developing, the geofencing technology to resist pavement riding, I think it's going to be a game changer and will hopefully address a lot of the challenges that we've had in the city thus far. The geofencing technology in the city centres in the pedestrianised areas has been very, very effective. Another city launched with us in the West Midlands. I think they didn't carry out as much work as our officers before they launched, and ultimately had to halt their particular trial. Whereas our officers, particularly Sullivan and Phil's team, put in a lot of effort with the provider before this project started to ensure that the geofencing technology was up to scratch. The site infrastructure, we're currently in having some discussions and about to go out to consultation initially with the members right across the city and then to the wider public about improving the cycling infrastructure in the city, particularly making some of the pop-up cycle lanes that we introduced and temporary measures more permanent in the coming months. So there'll be some information released on that. There are some challenges, continue to be some challenges around cycling in the city centre, and I'm continuing conversations with officers. More than happy to brief colleagues when appropriate. Councillor Ward, you're absolutely right that being involved in this trial is really, really important. Being able to shape what comes out of this is really, really important. I'm not going to make a habit of defending the government, particularly this government, but I think part of the challenge in extending this trial further that the DfT have taken is some local authorities have been slow off the mark in launching their pilot. So I think some boroughs in London have just started their trial. I think that has been the key reason why this trial, this DfT trial, has been extended by a year. But we're continuing to have conversations with. I know part of the challenge has been private e-scooters. You mentioned that. Councillor Tilsley often refers private e-scooter issues to me as a cabinet member. His area is not part of the trial, the void trials. So clearly, private e-scooters are challenging to register. You can't use them on the highway. And one of the things we're making very clear in the conversations we're having with government is that any regulation, if this is to be made permanent, which I think is very likely, any regulation should not be limited to hire schemes, but should also be absolutely relevant to private e-scooters too, because they won't have the geofencing technology, they won't have the measures that the voice scheme and other rental schemes have. But thank you for those questions from all the colleagues.
Thanks very much, Christine. Can we agree their recommendations 213 to 25? Anybody, any cabinet member not agree? It's agreed. Item 8 then is the 8457W Road Improvement Scheme, revised main scheme, CPO progression report.
Thanks, Ian. This report seeks the authority in principle to include additional land to progress the making of a related CPO and updated SRO for the A457W Road Improvement Scheme, revised main scheme, subject to confirmation of funding by the Levelling Up Fund. The existing CPO and SRO is being progressed, but additional land and works are required for the revised main scheme. However, as funding for the scheme is yet to be approved, the authority only authority in principle is sought at this stage to allow preparation work to begin. The report also requests authority in principle for the making of an order under Section 106 of the Highway Act 1980 to allow the construction of a new bridge over the Solar Loop Canal at Springville Canal Bridge as part of the revised main scheme and subject to confirmation of funding by the levy. Thanks you.
Thanks very much. Important road transport scheme. This, there are no comments then. Can we agree recommendations 2, 1, 3, 2, 4? Any cabinet member disagree? That's agreed. Draft health and wellbeing strategy, creating a bolder, healthier city framework for that.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Leader. Right, the draft health and wellbeing board strategy, creating a bolder, healthier city, sets out the health and wellbeing board ambitions for the next 8 years. The framework has 5 core themes for action, covering wider determinants of health, health protection, and environmental public health. The strategy supports a life course approach, and this is reflected in the framework, aligning with the Birmingham and Solihull integrated care systems outcomes framework. The 5 core themes run throughout the life course, which is split into 3 stages: getting the best start in life, working well, aging and dying well. Work has been informed by the experience and response to the pandemic, as well as an ongoing commitment to equality and diversity and actually inclusion. Cabinet is asked today to give approval for us to launch this actually very important strategy over an 11-week period. So it will be a lovely consultation exercise, and we are seeking comments out there on the draft framework that I have presented today. Consultation will build on what has worked well over the past 18 months, including the use of a range of social media, online forums, targeted community engagement, wider stakeholder engagement, board forums, and community engagement channels. This strategy is a live strategy, and it's something that we feel as a service, as Health and Wellbeing Board, as the partners and everybody involved. Especially, I'd like to name check a young lady, Stacey Gunther, and Justin, who have worked really hard to ensure that we've been really inclusive with this strategy. And I hope we don't have too many questions, but I'm really proud of this because I feel health and well-being is key in this city, and this strategy tries to incorporate it all. So thank you, Leader, and is there any questions?
John.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise a couple of big points. Thank you for this strategy. It's really interesting, and as it indicates, important in the light of the lessons learned from the pandemic. I think my broad question was what's going to be different in terms of what happens. And then I was going to come up with a suggestion here. I just flipped back through some of the cabinet reports. And because one of the ways to drive achievement is to challenge every activity as to what they're doing to contribute to that particular priority. And cabinet reports get specific reports on equalities, and you can apply that to other priorities as well. What they actually do is they ask how are the recommended decisions consistent with the City Council's priorities, plans and strategies. Maybe that question should be how are the recommended decisions moving forward with the City Council's priorities, plans and strategies, so that every action answers the question what is it doing to tackle health inequality in the city.
I do think that's an important question, actually, John, because there's much talk nationally at the moment about levelling up. But for my money, you can't genuinely level up an area unless you do 2 things. One is to improve educational attainment, and the other is to close the health inequalities gap. And we know there is a significant one here in Birmingham with a 10-year difference in life expectancy if you live in the wealthiest part of the city and if you live in the poorest part. So we do need to ensure we have a focus on health and well-being for all of our citizens. Paulette, to respond.
And I'm with you on that, Leader. John, that's a really important point, and this is why it's so important, especially with us looking at the integrated care system, that we are looking very closely at inequality and the bigger issues and what we're grappling with in Birmingham and ensuring that it is included in what we're doing. The reason why I am so pleased with this particular strategy, and I don't mind saying this, and I'll bring Justin in a minute because I know how passionate he feels about this. But the reason I'm so pleased is over many years, health and well-being was seen as separate to everything else in the city, and the Health and Wellbeing Board was something that was there to tick boxes. And during the pandemic, what we've been able to do as a Health and Wellbeing Board is really, one, engage our partners, two, engage the public, and three, really start to ask some of those really difficult questions and those questions that we need to do some targeted work And what we've also been able to do is start that work. And what this strategy is doing is going forward, rather than us just trying to work in isolation to try and get a few areas covered and tick in a box. We are working in a more integrated way across the system. So it's not just across Birmingham City Council, but it's across a whole system to ensure we look at the determinants of health and we try to address them. And this is why it's so important, the bits that I've talked about, looking at working with local communities, going out there and asking the right questions, working with partners, actually really tackling some of those issues that have held us back over the years is actually so important. So for me, this strategy will give us a direction for the next 8 years, but it's a wider direction. It isn't a direction that is just so limited as we've been in the past. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in Justin, because this is something that we've had so many meetings about. It's been quite enlightening. So Justin, come on, over to you.
Thank you. So just in addressing you a specific question, Councillor Hunt, we did make a commitment in everybody's back, everyone's business, to update the equalities impact assessment tool to include health inequalities, and we've been doing work on that to work out how to make that a way that's accessible to officers and doesn't create a kind of 101 questions framework. But alongside that, we'll be updating the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment and a series of community profiles and health inequality profiles, because it's unfair to ask officers to, in effect, guess what the health inequalities are unless we skill them up to be able to make that assessment in a more evidence-informed basis. So that work is going on, so that ultimately I hope by the end of this financial year, we will have integrated into the standard assessment tools for all policies and papers coming to Cabinet health inequalities alongside the other aspects that we're covering in everyone's life, everyone's business. And as Councillor Hampton alluded to, we have worked closely with the NHS and we develop an integrated care system so that there is good co-ownership of the strategy, and that in the strategy you will see there are some things where we've been very explicit that the ICS and the NHS should be the lead agency rather than the council, and in others where we are working through existing partnerships like the Community Safety Partnership, where they should quite rightly lead the work on crime and safety, the Health and Wellbeing Board has an important contributing role. So I hope it provides reassurance that we are very much looking at how this embeds our approach across all of the work of the council and the wider partnership with the Health and Wellbeing Board.
Thank you, Justin. Recommendation 2.1 is to give approval to go into consultation. Is that agreed? Any current member not agreed? All those agreed. We'll move on then to refresh of the transition strategy to support young people with additional needs for the later life.
Right, thank you, Leader. I am really pleased to be presenting this refresh of a transition strategy to support young people with additional needs for later life. This actually builds on a report that was presented to Cabinet actually over 3 years ago in June 2018, when we established the transition project and the implementation of the transition strategy, which was from 2018 to 2021. The transition project sets out a whole system, life course approach, improving outcomes for the young person and enhancing life chances and linked to opportunities in relation to education, employment, health, and community engagement. And the strategy at the time was drafted at pace and was not co-produced. But since then, co-production must be at the heart of our services in Birmingham. And since April the 1st, I am pleased that there has been extensive engagement and a more inclusive approach to refreshing the strategy. Following the consultation with key stakeholders across health and social care, officers have been working with people from public services forums and the Yes Youth Empowerment Squad to design and write the strategy. Starting the planning for transition at the age of 14, the proof of concept looks to test and grow a whole system life course approach in Birmingham, which is focused on commissioning and delivery of the new innovative models of support that are identified by outcomes for the young person and family rather than by the age and diagnosis. Several life course opportunities have been agreed, which will further strengthen the life course approach in Birmingham. So we are working with neighbourhood network schemes and grant allocation, social prescribing and family group conferencing. I am asking Cabinet today to approve the recommendations to refresh the strategy to support young people with additional needs for later life, and to note the co-production involved, which has been provided, and it gives a genuine voice to our young people and their parents and carers. Thank you, Linda, and are there any questions?
Thank you. Thanks very much. You?
Yep, thanks very much. And yeah, appreciate how much important strategy this is from some of the requests for assistance that I've had over the years as a councillor myself, to realise how difficult it is for the families who are trying to sort of charter some way forward here. And it's only when they sort of voice to you how difficult it is that you can see firsthand, because and it's like every life, until you experience the difficulty, you have no idea of how complicated the situation is. So I read the report with a lot of interest. There was one area that sort of stood out, hopefully give me a bit of clarification on it. I was just looking at the risk on that, the risk management section. It highlighted a lack of citizen and partner engagement in the development of the draft strategy and its priorities, and mitigation, as you said there, was down to co-production with partners. Now, I remember from the home school transport scenario we may well come on to later in the meeting that one of the mitigations there was co-production, and there have been some ongoing issues, I understand. I'm just hoping for clarification about how the co-production here can solve the issues that seemed that were unable to be solved with the home school. Sort of put a mind at rest is going to work, is what I'm asking.
I think it takes some reassurance the fact that the co-production is not just being with partners, it's actually being with young people themselves as well as their parents and carers.
You're spot on, leader. What you've got to remember, don't do it without me. And what we've tried to do, and fair enough, we only started in April this year, but we have done an awful lot of it. We have ensured we've included families, so parents, carers, and the young people themselves. And the reason for that is if we're working alongside them and we are listening to what they're saying, any strategy, anything we put forward, their voice will be absolutely strongly in. It doesn't mean we're not consulting with partners and co-producing with partners, but for us, going forward, in line with what Sharon's service is trying to do with the younger young people, we're trying in the future, everything we do, the voice of that young person is key, the voice of their family and the voice of the carers. Birmingham City Council is absolutely committed to that. It's not that we don't want to do it, it's just we have to get there. And at the moment, we are working with the families, we're working with the young people, we're working with the carers, but also key, working with other partners so people feel included to ensure it's done. I'm not saying you will get it right first time, but what I'm saying is keep challenging us on it, because I assure you it is at the heart of everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulette. Recommendation 2.1 is to approve this strategy. Any cabinet member not agree with that? Thank you, those agreed. Item 11, then, advocacy services. Well, that's your final one.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet is asked to approve the recommissioning of advocacy service to ensure that we not only meet our statutory obligations, but to build on the work that we have done across the sector, and in particular with our third sector, to improve health and well-being and building resilience and independent communities. Advocacy is providing the support someone needs to be able to express their views, to communicate choices, and to receive services, and also to participate in decision-making. It can enable people to take more responsibility, to have choice, control over decisions which affect their lives. It therefore promotes individuals' overall health and well-being by increasing self-determination on a larger scale and to help them promote social inclusion, equality and justice. Cabinet approval is required for us to proceed with the procurement of a single supplier contract for this advocacy service via an open route. And the contract will be for a period of 5 years, as said in the report, with an extra plus 2 years, and of a value of up to £9.8 million. And it will commence in April next year. And we need a single lead provider organisation, which will ensure that referrals are managed via the single point of access, providing clarity and consistency for citizens and professionals. The reason I've gone through this is because this is really important. And the market for this service are mainly national providers that deliver locally. And there are 3 main providers giving us limited but sufficient competition. And the organisations are third sector of a similar size and quality provision. Today, I'm asking Cabinet to approve the content of this report, to implement the strategy and to the commencement of the procurement activity for a single provider for advocacy and approach as it is set out in the report. And I thank the leader and if there are any questions.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Paula, in terms of the staff that will be used as part of this process once the contract's awarded, will the council actually physically check every DBS check all of those staff to make sure that they are appropriately safeguarding the people who will be using the service?
I'm going to say absolutely yes, but can I get back? Sorry, Leader, I should have answered.
That's okay.
I am going to say yes, but let me get back in writing with a response to that. I would say absolutely yes, because it's something we do as standard. But let me get back to you to reassure you in writing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we agree then? Recommendations 2, 1, 3, 2, 4. Any comment on the other group? Thank you. That's agreed. Item 12 then is Green Homes Grant and Local Authority Delivery. Deborah.
Thank you, Leader. This report is seeking Cabinet authority to accept and spend government grant funding as part of the Green Home Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme. The Council's solution by improving the scheme will be a key contribution to reducing carbon emission, improving energy efficiency and tackling the poverty to most of the fuel core homes in the city. It is intended to deliver energy efficient measures to over 1,400 homes split between council and private sector. We have recently been advised that the timescale for completion has now been extended of March, which is good news. I therefore ask the Cabinet approval to accept the recommendations between 2.1 and 2.8, which includes delegated authority to Managing Director Sick Healthy.
Thank you very much. Robert.
Thank you. First of all, under 3.4, it talks about what the sort of criteria are for this money being given out. And it references that each household is eligible for a grant. But obviously, technically, in a HMO, each individual room is a separate household. So it refers to household rather than buildings or property. So is it a case of it is that landlord would only be able to claim one for the whole building, would he end up being able to, because of the way it's worded, claiming as many as there are rooms in that HMO? I think I probably guess I'd come down and you have one for the building, but I would appreciate some clarity on that. And then also, what in terms of the grants given out to private landlords, what is going to be done around just some checking of the prices coming in to make sure that, as we all have heard happen on previous schemes historically, you don't find someone unscrupulously gets a quote that ensures that actually the price of the program they don't need to put in a contribution because they aren't really paying the builder what their quote they're providing to get the grants says it is.
People in the private sector are that dishonest. I'm shocked. You.
Well, I'll leave the private sector to respond directly to you on that. A similar point actually, but same section anyway. The report specifies that the subsidy doesn't expect to exceed £5,000 on average per household of landlords. So we'll call the household the landlord here. And I was just wondering what expectation is for what £5,000 will buy and what outcome will you get from that. So basically, say someone's got a G-rated property, basically the worst you can get, and you're going to get 5,000, you're going for a £5,000 grant. What are you going to get, and what is the outcome of that going to have on the property overall? Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. John.
Thank you. With respect to private households, is this one of the schemes where there's a subsidy available and then to private contractors? Because there is obviously a great deal of door knocking going on and canvassing to get work via these schemes, which are very welcome and very important schemes. But the concern is that you come across too many cases where people have signed up or are about to sign up for schemes where the business they're dealing with seems to be trying to lever a great deal more work out of the project than the householder can afford. So I just wondered what the oversight of the work with private households is going to be and how that is going.
Okay, thank you. Siobhan.
Can I just bring Guy? That's okay.
Of course you can. Let's just bring Guy from the table.
Thank you, and I'll attempt to answer those questions. So first off, in terms of the criteria and the issue with HMOs, so I mean this scheme is intended, to provide some cross-tenure intervention activity. So for landlords that operate either as an individual or a HMO, there's a requirement for them to contribute towards 33% of the overall cost for that intervention. I'm guessing that the works that we'll be targeting will be to do that whole house rather than individual unit. That's something I'll take back and talk to a Civico about. We've been developing with the Centre of Sustainable Energy, the criteria. This issue, I think there's a couple of questions similar around the role of contractors. So we've been very clear with the contracting arrangement through Civico that there needs to be value for money demonstrated through their framework contract. So this will be contractors already within the framework that are delivering this work. It's not a case of a household being able to bring in another contractor. So it's not like the old grant award where a household would just apply for a grant. This is a controlled delivery through either our existing repairs and maintenance contractors for our properties or through the Civico framework contract. The sort of range of measures and how we can demonstrate that average 5,000 will be an average, and you'll see in the appendix that includes a range of measures ranging from windows, LED lighting, etc. I have to say we've been under the cosh in terms of timescales because we've been trying to get the delivery approach put in place for what was a December deadline. We've literally over the last week been advised that's been extended to March, which will help. So over the course of the rest of this month, that engagement activity will be continuing, and that is controlled through the procured Midlands Energy Hub provider Acton Energy. We'll be coordinating that engagement, and we're envisaging works potentially starting in October. The targeting of works will very much be data driven. And again, that work has been done through Civico and the Central Sustainable Energy to identify those low EPC rated homes and eligible households.
Thanks very much, John. John?
Can I just follow up, because if the work is being done by approved contractors, are they meant to be canvassing for work, or is all the canvassing going on from some other source, and is it even legitimate? Should householders really be approaching it, and are they able just to approach the council if they think it might be eligible for a grant or some work?
They can approach us, and I'm guessing that the energy company obligation, because we've got a number of schemes running alongside this, the energy company obligation is very much the energy companies going out canvassing. That's separate to this local authority delivery, albeit it's kind of delivering the same interventions. So that will probably be energy companies going out trying to get households to sign up through their energy company obligation to apply for grant. As I say, that's separate to this particular one, and there is a number of other schemes coming on board now. Local authority delivery 3, social housing decarbonisation funds just being released. So there are a number of schemes, and it's a challenge to try and make sure they're all coordinated and delivered in that coordinated approach.
Thank you. Anything further, Siobhan? Okay, can we agree on recommendations 213 to 28? Any comment on the diagram? Thank you, those agree. We'll then go back to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Youth Justice Plan 2021.
So I'm going to take it right through the report's been read and ask Cabinet to run through on recommendations. This plan that's being brought today is also going to go to City Council next week, because it was a statutory requirement that every council followed on from consultation to do that. The plan before you, it outlines the youth justice services that are being provided and also the funding that's going to go attached to that. And I just want to make a point that in the last financial year, as in 2020 to 21, 694 children completed self-assessment surveys, and the outcomes will be contributing towards the shaping and implementing the partnership and commissioning priorities. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, John.
Yeah, thank you. I read this report with interest. As during the BCC elections, I had got a lot of meetings with interested parties, and this is a matter of actually very great concern to all of us. The particular recruitment of young people into gangs and the risks there are around young people in many parts of our city. In this report, I very much welcome the development of what's described. I think it's contextualised safeguarding, which is looking at the environment around young people. The question I had, and I noticed there's a whole network of partnerships around this, is the extent to which we're able to hold individual schools and colleges accountable for recognising they may have a problem, because it's where people are being recruited into gangs and where young people are being intimidated and bullied into gangs. It needs to be identified and dealt with. And just a little bit of experience of mine, sometimes schools are not very open to recognising they have this problem.
Thank you. So, I mean, I met with the team yesterday, and I just want to say thank you to the team that are working on this, particularly Claire Graham, because they're doing an absolutely fantastic job. It's a very complex area, as we all know, working with young people, and particularly when it comes to the gangs, which you talked about, and I've worked in that area myself, so I do understand that. The partnership work, there's been a huge amount of partnership work when it comes to this particular area, and it falls neatly in line with the localism agenda, which my colleague Councillor Hussain is now leading on. In terms of the schools, I think we have to be clear, it's everybody's responsibilities, not just the school's responsibility to take responsibility and ownership for this issue. We as a City Council are taking responsibility, the trust star, the third sector partners. Yes, young people can get recruited from schools, but it's not exclusive to schools either. There's other places where they are being recruited. So we will continue to work with the schools. I will push back and ask officers if we are asking for that commitment from the schools, and if necessary, we need to look at a charter or anything else like that. I'm more than happy to drive that forward. So thank you for making that plan, and I will take it back as a suggestion if it's not already happening. And I'm not sure if Councillor Francis has anything else to add.
Sure.
Thank you, Fanny. Just I'll be working very closely alongside Councillor Thompson on this to make sure that the schools do absolutely everything they can to protect children. But I think, as Councillor Thompson said, it's everyone's responsibility. And a significant importance here is communication and relationships that we have with our partners that we have to work with. So we will do everything that we can to make sure that every child, every person in our city is safe and protected.
Sorry, just to add to that. We're also making sure that we're not just making assumptions about young people and where they get recruited and what happens. It's essential that we work with young people and get that intelligence from them themselves. And that's one particularly pleased with the work that the team does. That's got to be important. You know, I'm not suggesting that I'm the youngest one in the room, but I'm still not any young enough to understand what's directly happening on the streets at the moment. So young people are heavily involved in the work that we're doing around this, and they will guide us on where we need to go.
Thank you. John Cobb.
Yeah, just to add that obviously the Partners around the Community Safety Partnership table very much supportive of this work, and there's kind of a dotted line reporting arrangement into the CSP board as well. So we're mobilising that partnership effort behind the work that was set out in the plan. And also just to welcome the fact that John Drew's taken over as chair of the Youth Justice Board of the city. I think John brings a wealth of insight and experience that will help us to drive forward further improvements in that area.
Thank you. This report, the recommendation 2.1, is to note the draft report and approve its submission to full council next week, as shown set out when she spoke initially. So we're happy to agree with that recommendation. Anyone not agree? That is agreed. Takes us back to item 13, which is the Tenants' Fees Act 2019 and enforcement policy in relation to landlords and letting agents. This report is in my name. And it informs Cabinet of the provisions of the Tenants' Fees Act of 2019. This Act was introduced to prevent unscrupulous landlords and letting agents from grossly overcharging tenants and holding them to account for this and other unfair practices. So this is a piece of legislation very much to be welcomed. The statutory guidance that sits alongside it also requires local authorities to have in place an enforcement policy in respect of issuing penalty fees. The National Trading Standards Estate and Letting Agency team implemented such a policy through the lead authority, which in this case is Bristol City Council. The recommendation in this report is to adopt the same enforcement policy as can be found in Bristol. Any comments on this? In which case then can we agree recommendation 2.1? Anyone not agree? Thank you, that's agreed. We've been running there for 1 hour 4 minutes. Unless anybody's desperately needing a couple of break, I'm tending to push on. Everybody happy with that? Okay, we'll go on to item 14 then. Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery repairs funding. Tristan.
Thank you, Leader. This report, fairly self-explanatory, seeks permission to bid for just under £5 million to DCMS for the Snazzy-led Men Fund, which is the Museum Estate and Development Fund. And then secondly, that those repairs should be focused on much needed works at the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, including roof window repairs. Just to note recommendations 2.1 to 2.4 containing all the usual delegations, but I'm sure Councillor Francis will have to add some more detail on the benefits to museum service.
Thanks, Tristan. Go.
Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Chair. If I may, I hope Cabinet will give their full support to this application, recognising the cultural importance of our museum and the reputation that we have both locally, regionally, nationally and internationally. So the benefits of investment will be profound. And it's absolutely vital that we get these repairs done. If I just add, Chair, we've got a very good working relationship with Arts Council in England. And I had a recent update meeting. We discussed this matter with the application for the main fund. And I know from that conversation that Arts Council are very supportive of our bid. So I hope we'll get all Cabinet support. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you. First of all, should declare an interest on it, given I'm a councillor appointee on Museum Trust, and of course my wife works, so I would probably like to start having water coming in the offices and they work. Water picture is obviously very supportive of the bid. I wasn't going to make any comments, but just on that last bit where you touched, you've had a preliminary chat with the Arts Council. Have we established with them if there's any need for the council to provide any support or match funding element as part of it? And if so, have we included that in the details?
I'm just flipping through it. It's probably best if an officer's in the formal answer. I think there was a match funding element, because obviously there is works going on anyway, on the whole site, so we effectively match funding.
So we usually
Well, let's just
Effectively, the works that are going on in the councils will be used as a match funding for the support on the
Okay, there's no more questions. Anything further, sorry, President? In which case then can we agree, recommendations 2, 1, 3 to 2, 4, everyone agree? That is agreed. Take us on to Birmingham City Council UK Athletics 10-year partnership. This is some extremely good news for the city. What this report seeks is delegated approval to agree heads of terms with UK Athletics to form a 10-year partnership beginning in 2022 to host sporting events that will align and help deliver the city's major sporting events strategy. So this formal agreement will be about us hosting the Indoor Athletics Grand Prix and the British Indoor Athletics Championships on an annual basis, consecutive weekends between February 2022 and February 2032. Previously, both these events were hosted biannually in partnership with Glasgow City. Birmingham City then needs to invest significantly in a new indoor track. We've had the track now for a number of years, and obviously it doesn't make sense to be spending money on the indoor track, and that was subject to a previous cabinet report. No doubt recall that investment was dependent upon securing an agreement such as this one that's in front of us this morning. The partnership also connects both parties to explore further opportunities to host a series of outdoor events at Alexander Stadium, which will form part of a legacy to the Commonwealth Games. Obviously, the Diamond League event is a key event that we have been hosting here in Birmingham for some years, and this agreement agrees that UKA will support and work with the council to secure this event for Birmingham from 2023 onwards. UKA, I'm pleased to say, will retain their headquarters here in Birmingham. We are the home of British Athletics. They will remain at Alexander Stadium. And just to note that in 2019, Birmingham's major events programme delivered more than £75 million of economic benefit to the city. So I think this is a significant report. It drives a further legacy from us hosting the Commonwealth Games and secures athletic events, international athletics events in the city for the next 10 years.
Thanks very much. And I'll say just on your previous comment about an hour into the meeting, I think of our last cabinet meeting, I think Richard was just feeling she was warming up. Got
more endurance than me.
Yeah, I obviously welcome any form of long-term athletics coming to the city. Point 7.4.1, I was going to pick up there was single contract negotiation. I'm surprised to see there that there's an agreement being written into it that it's justifiable because there is only one national governing body. Yes, I mean, you did say at one meeting it's not my job to be fair. Well, I will be fair. There is no thing. But what I was going to ask for assurance on was, this is the classic thing. We'll all agree now that, of course, we will allow a single contract negotiation because there is only one body, and then we'll find 10 years down the road or 2 years, some landlord or something's had a single contract negotiation off the back of that, and it was agreed. And what I'm asking for is assurance that a single contract negotiation only applies to UK athletics, not some other thing that comes out where there's a contract that needs that then could go out where other suppliers could quote for it. So some clause of the contract is what I'm talking.
I think your neighbour at this point is a little bit, clearly we have to have a negotiation with the holder of the rights to these events, and the holder to the rights is UK Athletics, the national governing body for athletics in this country, and that's why it's a single contract negotiation with UKA.
Okay, it's just the case with Blackstone, I mean, these other people who would get involved, obviously, as the sort of landlord, etc., of what is the sort of the NIA and some of these other the states.
This is not a negotiation with the landlord, it's a negotiation with the rights holder, which is UK Athletics. Robert?
Thank you, Gail. I think that's the commitment you was looking for. I want to pick up a couple of things. In terms of, obviously, in our negotiations, presumably we've got to say where they're going to be held. I imagine the athletics body would like that assurance. And so obviously, I think it's still Blackstone who own the NIA. It's like to be there. Are they putting any money in as part of this process? Because obviously they're going to reap a benefit from us getting this period of time. In terms of the payment details that are on this, I can't see why the payment details, what the council's putting in is listed as private. You get some explanation as to why that would be private. I can't see the commercial confidentiality applies. So I'd be interested to know why we've listed them as private. And then in terms of the benefits, it talks about previous benefits, and it gives an example around volunteers. So it does highlight that 55% of the volunteers used actually aren't from Birmingham. And so it'd be good, there's some work to be done as this, if we are successful, try and increase that number and have more volunteers from Birmingham taking part, rather than perhaps the opportunity being taken from people onwards.
There's no further comments, and only you picked those points up. I'll start with the volunteer one, because just yesterday I was over at the Library of Birmingham for the beginning of the recruitment for the volunteers for the Commonwealth Games, and there are 25,000 applications to be a volunteer on the Commonwealth Games and 13,000 opportunities available. The Library of Birmingham will be interviewing these 25,000 people over the coming weeks. The library is open 6 days a week, 10 hours a day in order to complete that task. So there will be a very wide pool of volunteers post the Commonwealth Games, and we'll obviously be looking to tap into that pool for volunteers in other events such as the ones listed in this report. The financial numbers being on the private agenda is, I believe, simply because we are still negotiating with UKA. We don't want to reveal our hand publicly at this stage. Glasgow do have an interest in 2 of these events. And then finally, Blackstone and the contribution either of Blackstone or the NEC, Blackstone being the owners of the NEC. There's not a direct financial contribution into the bid for these events, or indeed the new track that's going to be going in. Although, having said that, there is a reduced rate of hire for these events within the venue. So we could argue that there is a contribution made by the NEC company. Okay, if there's nothing further, then can we agree recommendations 2, 1 through 2, 3? Anybody disagree? That's agreed. Item 16 then is the delivery of the transport miles for the Commonwealth Games. This report makes a recommendation on a procurement strategy for the transport miles at Alexander Stadium for the Commonwealth Games next year. The transport miles are a critical part of the Games time transport solution for people arriving and leaving Alexander Stadium, because the stadium will be heavily reliant on buses as the primary mode of transport to and from that venue. These transport miles will be temporary, and the land will be reinstated post-Games as part of the park, and the grassed areas and the playground in Perry Park will be reinstated, subject to any conditions set out as part of the planning consent for the proposed works. In actual fact, we have ambitious plans for Perry Park as part of the legacy for the Commonwealth Games. So I very much envisage that the park will be one of the best parks in the city of Birmingham post-Games, if we can lever the funding to bring those ambitious plans to fruition. Any comments on this? Yes, Rob.
Thank you. A couple of questions in mind. So you talked about the restoration and the welcome to the park being restored, but it's really a question of how will that restoration take place. So is it going to be, as sadly too often happens when major events go into a park, it's a case of the land is leveled and some grass is put down. Obviously, that takes actually quite a long time then to be restored. Or will actually turf be relaid so it is usable in a relatively short amount of time by residents post the Games? And then in terms of the designated park and ride points referenced in here, it talks about the other park and ride points that people then brought to this location, but it doesn't mention where those park and ride points are. Appreciate people might not know now, but can nobly circulated to members telling us where all these park and ride points are. So I'd like to be in a number of members' walls, and members would probably want to know where they are.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't count this one, but I wanted to speak on the next one.
You got your bid in early, John?
I will speak mainly as a ward councillor on this, because The phrase you used there slightly alarmed me slightly was if we can leave the funding, because there ought to be a decent budget within this whole programme for significant restoration of Perry Park. Although one of the things I think would be good to see actually would be more work on enhancement of the park for the games, because this is an unusual situation where it's a green site for games rather than a complete new build. And people are used to turning up, I think, to events which are fairly flat and built up, whereas there's the opportunity to welcome visitors to quite a green space, which I find surprising in Birmingham, to find so much green space in our city when they come. The report refers to ongoing dialogue with all councillors, which is true, and one of the results of that is to ensure the preservation of the 200-year-old oak tree, which is on this map, which is terrific, and also terrific as a tree been identified really for the first time as being as old as it is. So the close examination is good. Comparing notes with residents, I think the concern that we have is whether the transport mile is growing quite a lot. As I said, this report didn't square to me with the ongoing dialogue I've had. It seems to suggest a rather bigger transport mile. And the question that was put to me was, from some of the residents, was, is there now a plan to run shuttle buses from Perry Bar Station up to the stadium? Because I think the original intention and expectations that most people arriving in the stadium would walk up at the station and walk up to the stadium, and then obviously it would be sensible to provide facilities for people with mobility issues to get up. But the questions raised seem to imply that actually people getting off the train might be more likely to get on shuttle buses than to walk. And if that's the case, there might be the possibility of reducing the amount of traffic going through by encouraging more walking.
Thank you. Well, let me pick up your points first, because we will be encouraging both walking and cycling during the games. As I understand it, there is currently no plan for shuttle buses between the railway station at Perry Bar and the stadium. The intention is that people will walk that final mile, and the organising committee are taking steps to animate that final mile to make it interesting for people who do walk along that route. Let me also make it clear that when I said the phrase, if we can raise a level of funding, that's not about restoration of the miles. That was about future ambitions for the park as a whole, and turning it into one of the best parks in the city. The budget for restoration of these miles and turning into the parkland will be held and paid for by the organising committee. And the intention is that these areas will be restored to the standard that they currently are at. And that brings me on to Robert Alden's point about will it be grass seed or will it be turf? I don't know the answer to that at this stage. That's a technical question. The restoration will be overseen by the Parks Department, and of course it is subject to any planning conditions that might be attached to the planning consent. So you might want to prompt someone to raise a condition in the planning committee meeting. And then with respect to the park and rides, I'll ask the organising committee to relay that information out to all the councillors. So if there's nothing further, then can we agree recommendations 2.1 to 2.3? And can we not agree? Thank you, those agreed. 17 is the digital inclusion strategy and action plan.
Thank you. So over the last year of the pandemic, we have seen record numbers of people getting online. It's estimated that we have made 5 years worth of progress of digital inclusion in 1 year, which is incredible. But for those who are still digitally excluded, they are now left even further behind than they were before, as more and more things have gone online, and online living has been a necessity over the last year. The digital inclusion strategy here today is seeking to address that digital inequality in the city and those that are still digitally excluded. It's a common stereotype that it's older people who are digitally excluded. 39% of people who are not online are under 60. So we do still have a huge number of people in the city of working age who are still unable to access the internet. And disproportionately, people living with disabilities are affected by that as well. There's been a huge amount of work that's gone into this report. working with partners across the city who are already working in this space to understand what work is ongoing, because there is some fantastic work going on in the city to get people online. But there's also some gaps in provision because historically it's not been brilliantly joined up around Birmingham. So the last several months, our team have been working to bring partners together to understand what's going on, to understand what we can do better through coordination, and to understand where the gaps are that we need to be filling. There are a whole host of reasons why people are not online, ranging from affordability of devices and data through to skills and confidence and beyond. And what we need to be doing is making sure that we're addressing all of those reasons in the ground. It's not as simple as providing a bit of training. If you can't afford a suitable device and data, you're still stuck online, and skills learned can expire pretty quickly as the digital world moves on, if they're not used. So you've got a long report here with all the actions set out that we plan to take to tackle digital exclusion in the city. It's not starting from phase 0, it is seeking to build on the work partners are doing. So the recommendations in front of us are to note the findings of the digital inclusion landscape report, to approve the city-wide digital inclusion strategy and action plan. And it's worth, just as a read across, noting that this was recommended in the Breaking Down Barriers Working Towards Birmingham's Future report as well, which particularly identified digital exclusion issues amongst younger people, preventing them from getting into work and education. It looks to approve the establishment of a digital inclusion team for a 2-year period to really jumpstart work on this. Costs are included in here. And also provision of budget to fund the recycling of up to 5,000 council devices are being retired that we can then pump out into the community for those that need them. With that, Leader, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks very much. John?
Thank you. It's an important piece of work. Mention the reasons why people are digitally excluded. I've been involved in some project work during the pandemic over the last couple of years. And the one factor that's not mentioned here is the good elderly people, is poor eyesight, which in our community we found was a significant factor in people who wanted to get digital access, and we were recycling devices that people were donating, and poor eyesight, and probably other kinds of creeping disability, which just creep up on people, and they may not be very conscious themselves that they have a disability which holds them back. But this is something that needs to be dealt with to improve digital inclusion in this age group.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I think it's ironic that during this piece on digital inclusion, I understand our stream has gone down, so we're not actually streaming at the moment. That's not my point, by the way.
I did just check, and I'm told the stream is up and running, despite the fact the internet's gone down for us in the room.
So you're recording them, is that what you're doing, as opposed to a live stream?
That's large.
11:22, we just got a message in the street just on that.
Well, okay, we'll sort this out outside the meeting, but we are being assured that the live stream is still.
Excellent. Okay, well, yeah, there was 2 points that I was going to make. I mean, I remember this coming to scrutiny about a year ago, and yeah, there was some really good examples and sort of given there was a family that was spoken about, we talked about using the Wi-Fi outside the library. You know, the library was closed. That was the only way to do the homework. Was the family sat on steps outside the library, you know, with Wi-Fi. And so, you know, this is really something that's important. I am a member of a sort of largest town council. As council on that in the country that sits within this area, they have actually put free Wi-Fi in all their town centres. They're not as large as obviously Birmingham city centre, but they do benefit there from having a mix of residential and commercial usage there. And they do find that it's not just shoppers who are using the Wi-Fi that they provide. You know, there's a lot of residential people tapping into that, and undoubtedly there's people there getting online who wouldn't be getting on any other way. So it'd be interesting to know if Birmingham City Council could look at doing something like that, putting some sort of community Wi-Fi into areas, so highly populated areas, and that might help alleviate some of that. And I think on this here with digital inclusion, you know, there's some large numbers that are being mentioned of people who aren't online, and I just think it's important that the council still gives a commitment that not all its payment procedures will go online. I'm supportive of online procedures, and they're more convenient for those of us who want to do it that way, and they're more convenient for the council to take their money that way. But not everyone can go online. Some people just because, no matter what you do, they can't go online. And I've got residents who have got their kids don't live near them, so they'll be travelling in to do their online payments. And so just that whilst I supported the report to get as many people online as possible, but also just ask that we retain aspects of the council for people without bank accounts, etc., so they can still pay for their services should they need to. Thank you very much.
It's clearly a balance there. Jane?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this is a very, very important strategy for our city, one that we really need to get behind. I think one of the key issues when we first went into lockdown with the pandemic, some 18 months ago, was how it had a disproportionate effect on some children and young people in our city, and certainly affected their ability to learn when schools were offering a curriculum online. So if anything, the pandemic has served to highlight some of the inequalities that we have in our city on the educational front as well. And that digital divide is still with us. So whilst there's been some really good work done seeking to address that, that's an ongoing piece of work. But we know that young people in particular are being affected. And I think we're right in, about 5,000 people in the city still don't have access to a computer. So it's vital, this strategy is vital to ensure the health and well-being of our local economy, and in particular our children and young people who have been disproportionately disadvantaged over the past 18 months. We need to make sure that everything possibly is done to make sure that people have access to equipment to make sure that their learning can continue.
Thank you.
Just to say, I tried going on the YouTube website. It's definitely not live at the moment. It's listed as a previously live event.
You need better IT, I think.
But it's
Also the council's IT.
I think YouTube reported.
The irony is missed on you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. But the button, so someone just needs to restart it, because it's, so the button ending it has been pressed.
Yeah, we just checked again, councillor, and it's saying that it's been okay.
Well,
Literally on it right now, and it's not.
Well, as I say, I'm not going to resolve that in this meeting,
So the internet in this room isn't that good.
I'm on my mobile internet because the internet industry is
Well,
negative.
just for clarification, YouTube reporting the meeting's end.
Okay.
Go from the UK, so
You can extend the length of this meeting, but we're not going to resolve this issue.
No,
I guess we take it offline. Bridget, any
It is offline.
It's all very sensitive.
Yeah, so we'll pick up the IT issues for this meeting with the IT team and community services afterwards. That is deeply unfortunate. Ewan, on community Wi-Fi provision, there's been projects in the past, and there have been schemes in the past providing it around Birmingham. I think the main moves have ended where providers have pulled out. We are in dialogue with lots of the major players in the city to see if there is more we can do in that space. So it's definitely something that we are exploring. When it comes to customer access, so ideally we want everything to be available online as a council. That is the quickest, cheapest, easiest way to do things. Obviously, there will always be people who cannot access that for whatever reasons. We do need to have a pullback for those that can't access it. But actually, the default should be enabling people to get online. So it's not just about being able to pay for your garden waste or whatever. It's about being able to Skype your grandkids. It's about being able to connect with people online. It's about being able to read up on things that interest you. The positive impact that can have on your whole life should not be underestimated. And ideally, we want people to be able to access that whole spectrum that the online world can offer them. We will be going out to consultation on a customer access strategy soon, within the next few weeks, and that will be asking people in Birmingham how we can do better to enable them to access our services. So we will be picking up issues around that as part of that consultation. John makes a very good point. There are some fantastic bits of software these days that can compensate for or help people who are living with disabilities. making sure that as part of getting people online, they've got access to those is really important. So, being able to make text bigger, for example. I know council laptops come with something that will read text out to you. There's some really great stuff that can help people with disabilities with tech. So it's more important to actually make sure they've got access to that where there is enabling technology. But again, as per the answers to you, where there are people who this is absolutely not an option, we do need to have that fallback still available. Thank you to Jane for the comments and all the work I know you're doing in a bit of the world to get young people and kids at school online in the pandemic. There's been a tremendous amount of work I know going on there, which shouldn't be underestimated. I think that's all the points picked up, so I'll pass back to Jen.
Thank you very much. If we can agree on the recommendations 2.1 through to 5. Thank you, that is agreed. 18 then is human resources and organisational development transformation. Tristan?
Thank you, leaders. This is an extremely important report. I think the main gist of this report is to move us from a situation where we have a HR service that is struggling to provide the services this council needs. It's struggling in terms of capacity, perhaps not surprising given it has 45% less full-time staff than it did in 2016, but also an organisation, a HR service that hasn't had the necessary investments that many places have seen over recent years, and is therefore needs to be put in a place where we have the right skills in the right places to deliver the outcomes the organisation needs to support the rest of the organisation. And I think hopefully this will be broadly welcomed because I think this is a step in the right direction. It is a very important piece of work and mirrors the transformation that we have undertaken in other parts of the organisation, not least in the finance service, in order to bring it up to best in class, which is our aspiration and what we should all be aiming for in terms of the organisational services that support the council. So with that, I shall hand back to the leader for any questions.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Obviously, the council's had a number of issues recent years around the DBS checking contractors, etc. through it. So I just wondered if someone can give some breakdown on how that process will change as part of this, as part of the HR review, so that there's a more robust process in place.
I'm not sure that changes the subject of this particular transformation, but there is a change coming through. You?
Probably a similar question. I was just going to ask with HR and the organisation there, just to make sure that is everyone who worked for the staff, whoever the staff who work within it, are we sure they've all been DBS checked and they've all got clean DBS checks? Is the question I was going to ask.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the subject of this report. John?
Thank you. Obviously, this work is necessary, and it appears that some earlier cuts overshot a little bit in this department. Just wanted to ask the cabinet member where the funding will come from for this development of human resources.
Yeah, just on the DBS issues. First, in terms of the staff themselves, obviously there is a process, the DBS process for checking council staff, our own staff, self-employed, who have any contact with individuals, and that won't change as a result of this. In terms of external organisations, leaders absolutely right, because that plays into the agenda around contract management as much as it does around our own HR service. It clearly has a role, but that's part of a broader question and proposals being developed as we speak. In terms of where the budget will come from, members will recall the delivery plan reports that assign budgets to the individual areas. This is one of those transformational areas of work. Essentially, this is an increase of 1.3 million in the budget to the core service. And obviously that doesn't go anywhere near replacing the money that has been taken out of the service as a result of austerity over many, many years. But it will be, we are confident it is enough to uplift the service to a position where it can deliver the support the organisation needs as a whole. So in terms of, there will be an increase there'll be a reduction in FTE. However, what we're hoping to do is have a more skilled, more engaged and positive workforce that is taking on all the opportunities that upskilling and technology will allow them to do to create a more efficient HR service or people service, as it will be called from now on, but one that meets the expectations of a modern organisation. It's a big transformational project, and I really don't want to underestimate the importance of it. we need to fund it. Funding has been allocated through previous reports and as outlined in this report.
Okay, thank you. Can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.3? Agree. Item 19, those planned procurement activities, October through to December of this year, and quarterly contract award schedule, April through to June. Kristen?
One moment to get one place on the document pack. Yes, this is of course the standard report, but substantial number of items. Of course, as ever, this will go through this process and to be scrutiny to have a look at as well. But of course, if there are any questions, happy to take them up with the relevant service areas.
Thanks very much. My question's around the CCTV software and recording system. Is this the system? The two questions really. The first one, is this the system that is based in the basement at Lancaster Circus? So I know this is a 5-year contract, and will we have Lancaster Circus in 5 years' time? So what would happen around it there? And I noticed on the actual report itself, reading in the comments section, it says there is no formal contract in place for this service. This has been purchased on a non-compliant basis. I was just wondering how many other contracts do we have at the moment that have been purchased on a non-compliant manner? Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan.
Yeah, on the I'll come back on the first one. On the second one, work is ongoing to collect information exactly like that. Request came from scrutiny to understand the full picture in terms of compliance and procurement. And there is actually a session this week where we go through some of that information. I'll have to check those numbers, but I can report back as we included in that exercise. More than happy to do that. In terms of CCTV, I understand it does relate to that control centre process, but I'll bring in. I think it's. I imagine it sits under Rob's area. Rob, I don't know if you've got any more details.
Thank you. Yes, it is CCTV that's operating in the control centre at Lancaster Circus. We are due to move out of Lancaster Circus, but that isn't a current move that's factored into this. It is the backup system that we require for that CCTV process.
Could I just ask then, for you, Leader, would that, if we say in 2 years' time we sell Lancaster Circus or dispose of it, what happens to the remaining 3 years of the contract? Will this still be applicable to the software, or is that just 3 years we can't use?
And no, it will be applicable to the information that we've got and the kit that we've got in place at the time.
Okay. Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, can we agree their recommendations 2.1 through to 2.3? Thank you, that's agreed. Item 20 is for Cabinet to note an emergency decision. That emergency decision was taken by the Chief Executive. It was taken because it needed to be implemented before the next scheduled Cabinet meeting, which is the meeting we're sat at today. It was taken in line with the City Council's constitution. All 3 group leaders were consulted upon this decision. The decision authorised the termination of an agreement with the provider of home-to-school transport and authorised the commissioning of an alternative provider. This decision is also not subject to calling because it was so urgent that its implementation could not wait until the expiry of the calling period. As I say, this is for noting. Robert.
Thank you. Obviously, what we've seen happen slightly since this decision making is that many of the problems that have been there in previous years have indeed been repeated again this autumn. So if you look at some of the parents groups for this service, you can see that the letters have gone to the wrong families with wrong personal data on it. You can see the calls to travel assist are going unanswered. Again, there's been issues with children either being late to be collected and so therefore late to school or not being taken at all. Clearly, for many of these children, that causes significant anxiety issues. It's incredibly unsettling and often can lead to an impact that affects that whole day's learning at school. And it's even been an incident where the wrong type of transport was sent. So transport turned up, which wasn't suitable for a wheelchair user. The wheelchair user was the person who needed to be collected, so they couldn't be taken. All of this, of course, is after the press statements that the Cabinet put out, saying that there will not be any experience or interruption to the service as a result of the decision taken, and clearly there has been really significant introduction to the service. And really what we're hearing is yet again having a situation where there has been serious safeguarding issues in services, there's promised reassurances have been broken, there hasn't been good enough communication, and once again promises to parents haven't been met. And the services really has to finally be fixed. It just isn't good enough to say this is a refresh and it'll be better next time, and every time I say it isn't better. And it's a real shame this isn't being live streamed at the moment, so parents could actually hopefully hear about what might be done to actually make it permanently better rather than perhaps just hollow words that don't actually deliver the improvements that are needed. And indeed, on a separate point, we don't seem to, I think we're not, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure we're actually letting the public into the meetings at the moment, and we're meeting our requirement to allow access to them by live streaming. Whether that's actually legal to continue the meeting if the only way public can access it is by live streaming and there isn't a live stream. That's perhaps something that legal might have a think about as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian. These are two sort of quick sort of questions, really. One is that has every driver who, since the start of the term, has every driver who has taken a child to school this term by the Birmingham City Council Home to School Transport Service had his DBS checked in person by Birmingham City Council and been found to be clean? And just to echo the words of Councillor Walden, just to quote 17th of August, we would like to reassure parents that owing to the extra contingency that the council has brought in preparation for any unforeseen issues, we are able to replace this resource immediately, and families, and most importantly, vulnerable children, will not experience any interruption to this service as a result of this decision. Well, I think from what we've been hearing since school went back, that really is not the case. And I was just really interested to know this term how many children has the service not taken to school, because I understand that some children have not been going to school and other ones themselves are having to take the children to school themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring the chair and I'll make a comment first. I do recognise there are still problems with this particular service, but they are nowhere near on the scale that occurred last year. There were some problems yesterday, as I understand, with transport to Baskerville School. I think the very fact that this decision has been taken does demonstrate that there are more robust systems in place now for dealing with issues that arise with home school transport providers. Bring Sharon.
Yes, so just to start off with, and thank you for your questions, I think I just want to start off with, first of all, apologising to the families that have had disruption, because we tried to do what we could to avoid that from taking place. The other thing is to the opposition that it's not helpful when we keep reading issues into one. The report is clearly about the decision to terminate the contract. Now, some of the other issues that you're bringing up are separate issues that were not to do with terminating the contract. Terminating the contract was absolutely the right thing to do. We was in the right space and we had no choice but to do that. If we had not terminated the contract, we would have been irresponsible in my view, and I don't think any of us were prepared to go down that route. It was absolutely the right thing to do. In terms of the new contractor that we contracted, the aim was not to have any disruption. Now, we have to be very clear that we are contract managing. That's what it is. It's about contract management of contracts. So the contractors all have a responsibility, and it is clear in the contract, their responsibilities towards DBS checks, and they have to withhold those. When we had a misdemeanor, we cancelled the contracts, and that, as I said, that was the right thing to do. But we have to be clear here. We have to hold contractors to account, and that's what we're going to do. In terms of the disruption, there were issues from the previous contractor around 2P and other things like that that created an issue, and unfortunately there was nothing that we could do about that. And the fact that those issues did arise really demonstrate why we was in the right space to end that contract anyway, because the care for the young people wasn't there if they were thinking about it in the first place. We will continue to update the chamber. I have done that since I've been in post on a weekly basis. We are not freezing out parents. I've been working all over the weekend with parents, contacting with the service. The service has been working 7 days a week over the last 7 days to try to make sure we can minimise as much as possible and provide answers and get things chased and lead as much as possible. And I will continue to do so.
Thanks very much, Sharon. If we can note this decision, then we'll move on to item 21, which is appointment to outside bodies. As well. Now moving on, which there is one, which is to, in respect of the Banners Trust, it is to reappoint. The recommendation is to reappoint Mr. Roger Barley from the 7th of September 2021 until the 6th of September 2025. Is that agreed? And cabinet members disagree? Agreed. That takes me on to other urgent business. Does anybody have other urgent business that is not going back on a report we've already had a discussion on?
No, it's relating to a comment. We were accused of conflating two issues when referring to the DBS issues, which is why the contract was terminated, and the issues that have been experienced this week. But I'll just highlight the 2.2.1 of the report that was under that item does in fact also cover the awarding of contracts to providers who did provision of the service this week. So in fact, they are the same related.
But not all of the contractors, you didn't terminate all of the contractors, and not all of the contractors that refer to in the report delivered the service over the last couple of days. So there are a number of issues that you have raised that are not necessarily in relation to that particular contractor and the report that we presented.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes our business for today's cabinet meeting. Thank you.